Welcome back. Today we are going to look at feet a little bit more in depth. There's a video that I've made on the legs and the feet from the Bridgman book at this point, and I've done some information in the master series of the figure drawing videos, but we'll look a little bit more into the design of the foot here in this video. Now, to start off with, we want to look at the design of the foot. And there are three different arches to it. There's the transverse arch, which is the arch that goes across this way. So all the toes, all of the metatarsals are in an arc form in this particular direction. Then there's the medial arch. And this is the one that we're all mostly familiar with, but there's also a lateral arch over here. And this side has an arch as well. It's just not as large and pronounced as this side's arch is. So we have three arches in the foot. And this is why in the design that I ask for people to draw when taking my anatomy classes, where we start with the door wedge and then we draw the bones within it, the heel bone, the toes, the arch of the foot, and then the part of the foot that attaches to the ankle, which at each point here, something important is positioned. In this case, it's the break where the toes are. Over here, it's splitting the heel at this corner right here, and this corner up here, and then where the ankles are attached. The ankles in my particular design are a little far forward. They should be back a little bit more. So the door wedge should actually be a bit more upright like this. The one that I drew here is a bit lazy. So that with the heel here, at the height of the arch here is where the ankles will attach. Now, when drawing this, you're building an arch that goes across, but in the design of it, the medial arch is high and the lateral arch is low. So you would actually see a plane through here if you were looking on the medial side. So on the lateral side, then the arch is going to be a little bit more like this, where the medial side, it's going to be a little bit more like this. There is a distinction between the two, but this is a more advanced foot. I don't ask the students to draw that right away. Here again is the medial arch, the lateral arch, and the transverse arch. But in these feet for the science classroom, these are the plastic feet on the science lab skeleton that isn't really well put together because it's bolted together, it's screwed together. It has mechanical pieces that hold the bone shapes together. So everything flattens out a little bit more, including the rib cage and the pelvis being upright instead of at their angles respectively. There's actually a lot more arch than we think. Looking at this image down here and this image over here and even this image here, you can see quite a lot more of the design of the arch. The lateral side of the foot has muscles traveling along the baseline of the foot, so it makes one side of the foot, makes it look like there is no arch on this side, so we assume the foot to be flat, but there are muscles that cross through there. And the arch is more about making sure that this part of the foot stays dynamic looking instead of it flattening out like the wedge that we start with. When we're drawing from the foot, we want to think about the change in the anatomy, the change in the places of the foot. Unlike this foot here, you can kind of see this is like the type of foot that somebody would draw, where everything has a bit of a generic feeling to it. But even with this, you can see a little bit of the stair stepping happening with the bones. It isn't that dynamic though. It doesn't show a drastic change between all of those pieces, and the arch looks a little bit more flat-footed than it does a normal arch. This is the type of foot you're going to see a lot on a 3D model. You're not going to see the anatomy being extreme. especially on medical sites or sites where there are 3D models built for the artist to look at, or for anyone to look at for that matter. But artists have a tendency to utilize those sites for the sake of reference. And you just have to be really careful about that because they aren't well designed, and they're certainly not designed for artists. Looking at the toes on the foot up here, it feels the same way. Right? Everything feels simplified. It doesn't feel dynamic. But there are certainly plane changes along the way. You have the bone along here, the bone along in here, and the bone through here. Here, here, and here. Here, here, and here. Now, because of the shoes that we wear, our toes curve like this. This is caused by shoes being worn. If we didn't wear shoes, our toes would actually be a little bit more like this. The first bone here, the second bone here, and the third bone here, a little more flattened on the ground plane. Not that it would be this extreme, but you would see more of this kind of relationship between the three bones instead of it being something like this. This is malformed because of shoes. And most modern humans have this problem with their feet. Somebody who goes barefoot a lot is going to have a foot that's a bit more like this. We're going to see the toes more flattened to the ground than arched to fit within the toe box of the shoe. My recommendation when practicing drawing the toes is to try and draw the toes not necessarily based upon the modern foot, but based upon how our feet should actually look. So in the case of this foot, we would draw the toes a little bit more like this so that we represent that flattened toe surface. Instead of the toenails facing forward, they would face upward a little bit more. And then we have the tendons that draw upwards towards the ankle, and they all radiate towards what looks like a central point because they're coming from the extensor muscle group, which is up along in the lower leg, right? So all of these are moving towards this point right here, which is then going to go upward this way into our leg. We also have a smaller group of extensor muscles that sit right here that pronounce the arch, the transverse arch even further, where it's not just the bones that are doing that, it's also the muscle group that's doing that. Now, when drawing the feet on a ground plane, it is a good idea to draw them flat like this, instead of seeing all these curves that are kind of floating looking, especially with this foot because it literally is hovering above the ground there. We have a tendency to draw the arches like this. If we were drawing it on the floor plane though, first thing I would say is to draw the floor plane. Then draw the toe block. In this case, we have two bones. Then the foot pad, then the arch, then the heel pad, and then the heel on the ground, and then up into the Achilles tendon, up into the extensor muscles. So this is flat on the floor. Then a division through here. This is flat on the floor. The back of the foot, or the other side of the arch, sorry, not the back of the foot, but the other side of the arch, and then the heel, all looking grounded on the floor plane. The foot's going to look like it has more contact with the surface than having these curves that don't look like they're pressed against a surface at all. See, if I draw a ground plane and then I draw the foot like this, or I draw it like this, you can kind of tell which one feels a little bit more planted on that surface. And that's what we're attempting to do with our drawings, is make them feel physically tangible, making contact with the world. So the foot over here would be the same way. We would start with this surface, and then we would design the rest of it with more of the architecture of the foot. But down along the floor, we would make sure that we can see a separation in here. We would make sure that we can see a curve back in here where the muscles shift from the bones to the more open space of the arch right along in here. So we're talking about the breaking point between this bone and then the rest of the arch through here. And then everything else is going to be pressed firmly against the floor plane. Bring this up. And the highest point of the foot is on the other side of the foot. So we wouldn't just follow the tendons of these toes along here. We would follow the big toe up through here and then up into the ankle. So there's a bit more height to that foot when we draw it. The ankle on the lateral side is in the very center between these two ends here, where the ankle here is a little bit more forward. We would be drawing it right along here. From the back side of the foot, we have the heel pressed against the floor plane, the two sides of it, which we can squish down a little, but we don't want to make them too rounded, unless you're doing a cartoon. Then the Achilles tendon that goes up into the gastrocnemius and soleus. Then you can see the difference between the ankles in the posterior view or the anterior view more easily than you're going to on a lateral view. We have the high-low, low ankle over here, tendon going up into the leg, high ankle over here, bone going up through here. Now the tendon, what I mean by this is we have muscles that are passing down on both sides of the ankle, and we're seeing the tendinous mass out over here a little bit more along that lateral side. You can actually feel those tendons too when you wiggle your foot. You can feel them pressed up against the bone. That would be your peroneus longus and brevis that are doing that. Then this quickly turns into muscle mass from the flexor group and from the soleus muscle. The gastrocnemius is tendon by the time we get down to this point, but the soleus continues down a little farther. Then the big toe comes out just a little bit on this side, and what we actually see more of on the back side of the foot is the rest of the toes over here. So looking at the foot from above, we have the big toe in line with the heel, and then we have the other toes that are out over here, and this sort of forms a tripod effect between all of the toes, and that's what holds us upright. Now, in the case of this particular drawing here, we want to show a few different breaking points. We want to show the extensor muscle group over here breaking away from the toes, which is this part right along in here. Then we want to see the side plane as it dips into the lateral arch, then the heel block, and then between the extensors and the heel, we have the lateral malleolus, and then we have the Achilles tendon. And over on this side, the medial malleolus sits just behind the Achilles tendon, and then out towards the front we're going to see the big toe, and everything in between there is arch, which we do not have to draw at all. But notice the complexity of this as opposed to just drawing the back of the leg like this, which is what happens a lot of the time. And I know that I made that really simplified, but it's kind of like that. You notice all the different overlaps in here, and the drawing feels more dimensional, more sophisticated in its design because of all of those different breaking points. For the bottom of the foot, we have the big toe, the other toes, the toe pad behind the arch, and the heel, which I'm barely fitting onto the page here. Let me shrink this down a little bit more. So when drawing this, so I'll use this one as the example, we want to make sure that we draw the heel for sure. And then we want to draw the Achilles tendon. So I would think of like a central point right here. And this line that we draw aims at that central point, which gets it in the location where the tendon actually attaches to the heel. Then this extends outward. And then we have muscle mass at this end that it blends in with. So you would see this kind of an overlap between these three parts. Then we have the front of the leg, which we can start a little bit more straightened out. Then bring in the tendons, find the bottom of the foot, draw this with a separation point along here. Draw a hint of this line over here. And this is where you have to decide how many lines across the bottom of the foot are you going to draw. Notice all of the different skin folds that are along in here. You don't actually want to draw all of those because then it's going to make the foot look a little bit more like an undead foot or something that looks a bit more aged and a little more grotesque. We want to be really careful about elegantly designing all of these shapes so that it still reads gracefully as the human foot. This is going to disappear into the top of the foot, which is going to be over here, and we're going to see a little bit of mass of the foot along here. And remember, this is arched, so you don't want everything to sort of flatten out through there. And in accordance with the foot that we're drawing from here, you have the metatarsals that create this ridge right along through here. It gets smaller as it goes out towards the pinky toe. Then I would just literally draw circles and make sure that each circle overlaps. Then connect this one through here, making sure that there's a line along here and there's a skin fold over here. But there's a division between the two to show the length of the foot. Then up on this side, a slight curve for the toenail, the knuckle, the second knuckle where the toe actually attaches to the foot. And then on each one of these, we want to kind of do the same thing. We want a skin fold on this side, and we want a little line through here that attaches each one of them to the foot proper. And then make sure that they're all staggered and they're in somewhat of an arch. Then out along over here, making sure that this curve is fairly pronounced, and break it away from the heel block right along through here. So there's an overlap in this particular section right along in here. And by doing this, yet again, we create something that feels a little bit more dynamic than flattened and boring and too simple for what we're looking for in our drawing. And then there's also a division between this part of the fatty pads on the bottom of the foot and all of this over here, which can crumple into slight sections, but I again would be very careful about that, not being too descriptive about all the different changes of mass that's in there, or else you're going to have a very complex and very busy drawing. From the front of the foot, we want to think again about that separation that's something like this. So across here, and we come up to the ankles, our mannequin through here. We have the medial malleolus. We have the lateral malleolus. This one's a little bit longer here and shorter here. This one's a little more uniform between here and here, or you can even round it out slightly, which it is a little bit more rounded. But for the instant drawing, to put things together, this is the way that you would treat it. Then we would have a curve through here to show the separation of the foot mass from the rest of the leg. And along in here, you're going to have a tendon. This is the tibialis anterior tendon going into the arch that separates this side of the foot from the rest of the foot over here and from the front to the side of the foot. So there's that visual separation right along through here between the two. And this comes in a little bit more. This goes straight upward through here. Then you have the extensors coming down over here. That's what this tendon is right here. Those are the extensors. And those are going to go down to these four toes, but not the pinky toe. Now we round this out this way. The extensor group is right in here and actually kind of comes across a little bit more through here. And then the muscles come forward. Then you have the big toe separating from the arch portion of the foot through here. This comes down and outward this way. And then the big toe comes in this way. So from the top view, the big toe does this and all the other toes do this in opposition of each other. However, in this particular instance here, they all seem to roll the same way. Again, that's the foot that has been influenced by the shoes. But since this is our reference, we need to comply with the designs that we see here, or the shapes that we see here for the design. The big toe flattens on the floor plane, and then the actual end of the toe is right around in here upward, and we can see the entire underplane of the toe along here. The front of the toe here, and then the side plane over here, side plane over here, toenail through here, and then the second knuckle back along in here. Then a slight space between this toe and the other toes. Then toenail for this toe, toe pad. then the second toe pad. And we're looking at making the bottom line stagger upward ever so slightly between each of these. And then the pinky toe has this tendency now, because of our shoes, to curl downward completely. And we sort of see that here with that toenail facing almost directly forward. So in a way, if we are going to draw the foot that is in a shoe all the time, each one of these toenails is going to be more forward facing than the previous. This one is going to be a little bit more upward, then this one's pitching this way, then this one this way, and this one this way, forward towards us, towards the viewer. And I would start all the way over here with the pinky toe, making sure to draw this shape, and then the side plane of the foot right over here being overlapped by that shape, then meeting with the tendon that goes up to the extensor. Then this toe through here. So we have breaking point number 1, breaking point number 2, 2 lines separated from each other. Then this toe here, 2 lines separating from one another. Then this toe here, the first line separating, then the length back in towards the foot. And we don't really see all 3 segments of all of these if we're drawing them like this. This is going to be on the downslope on the other side of these shapes. But what we will see are the tendons that head up towards that extensor tendon that's right up along in here. And what we're looking for yet again is overlap. Over here, overlap between these 2 shapes. Along here, overlap. Along here, overlap. Space between here, and there should actually be a little bit more space. I didn't give enough of it to that particular drawing. And then divisions along through here to show the front, this segment, and this segment. The front, this segment, and this segment, and so forth, until we get all the way over here, where I'm going to erase this through just to show a slightly more dynamic overlap, just like over here, a dynamic overlap between those shapes. And then making sure that this outer contour along here has a nice curvature to it before it reaches the tendon along through here. And all of this is the side plane of the foot, the muscles on the side plane of the foot, bones and muscles of the side plane of the foot. And each part that I'm drawing has a clear overlap between the other parts. They don't all just wash together flatly into one another. And then finally, for this view, bottom of the foot, back of the foot, top of the foot, cylinder form going back into the leg, the Achilles tendon and the heel, separated from the ankle through here. And we will sometimes see a little hollow on the back side along in here. And it's not a bad idea to actually draw the curvature of that hollow to show the difference that this is in the middle. If we're looking at this from the cross section, the tendon is back here where the ankle is out over here. And that hollow that we're drawing is sort of helping us see that divot or that impression and change in volume between this and this back here. The heel cutting across along here, and then a clear division of the arch lifting along through here. Even though you don't see it very easily, it's this along here. We definitely want to make an impression of that in our drawing, because in a photograph, you don't question what you see. In a drawing, we are questioned for what we've drawn. And we want to make sure that what we draw has that believability to it for the viewer to understand what they're looking at. The arch of the foot, the big toe is on this side of that arc, and then the other toes are on the other side of it. So the big toe now, we have a bump right here for the metatarsal, first segment, knuckle, and then this dips down into where the toenail is going to go, right along through here. And this is on a slight up plane, the front of the toe, the base of the toe, with space between the bottom and the ground plane. And the toe pad that comes back, overlapping the length. And then the other toes over on the other side are going to arc down along through here and terminate. Some will terminate a little bit out in front of the big toe, and some will terminate behind the big toe. But the thing to keep in mind here is that this foot is elevated and not pressed against the ground. So as they're elevating it, these toes are lifting up a little bit more when they would actually be curving downward like this. And you won't be seeing them. You'll be seeing the big toe if we're looking at it in pure profile. When we're looking above, we'll see a bit more information. But at this point, we're looking at the side of it. And I'm going to do something here really quickly. I know I'm cheating when I do this, but I'm going to roll all of this back a little bit. My toes expanded a little bit too far. I was talking so much, I wasn't paying attention to the actual shape that I was drawing. Remove all of that, and then put that bump back in right around in here. Let this pass behind the bump. And then this is the other toe sticking out. I made it a little bit farther forward. This is the arch on the underside through here, the underside of the ankle along here, the back side of the ankle over here. And this I'm going to bring forward a little bit more because now that we're putting the musculature on it, I need to make sure it's not the width of the armature alone, but that it actually has the mass that it needs for the tendons and the muscles that sit on top of the bones. And this is going to immediately start curving back into the gastrocnemius and the soleus. So yet again, I'm thinking about overlapping lines wherever I can overlap them. Overlap in here, overlap back here, overlap through here, this shape out to the side, and this is tendon along here, so there isn't as much of an overlap. And that is the way that you would study feet. You don't just draw what you see, you design it a little bit further. Feet look generic a lot of the time. We don't have these really intricate, beautiful shapes in every photo reference that we see. A lot of the feet that are photographed are on younger people, so they aren't going to be as aged looking where you can see the tendons and you can see the bones and you can see the muscles. So it's up to you to push those designs just a little bit further. What I'd like to see all of you do are some foot designs, and post those over on the Discord channel and let me know that you did some foot studies from this video that you watched. And I'm more than happy to look over those with you. All right, I hope this has given you some point of reference where to go when you're studying feet. Feet don't need to be that complicated when you're studying them, but they are a complex part of the body. Like the hands, they have a lot of little complex shapes. But as long as you create overlap within each of the sections of the foot is going to feel dynamic, it's going to look dynamic, and it's going to have that thing that makes it as dimensional as the rest of the human form that we know so much more about because we focus our studies elsewhere on the body much more than we do on hands and feet. And we really do need to take the time and spend as much time on hands and feet as we do on portraits. Not that we draw a lot of barefoot people, but to have this much control of the feet also means that you have this kind of language that you're speaking in your mind with areas of the body that are like this. So both the hands and the feet will have a lot more complexity to your drawings if you think about them as a series of complex shapes where you can literally see the plane breaks between all of them. Good luck with your studies. I hope this helps a little bit. We'll do another video on the feet coming pretty soon with feet in action, because the heel and the rest of the toe mass do slightly flex away from one another, and we want to pay attention to that for when we're drawing feet in action, like dancers' feet or somebody jumping, somebody running. and the types of shape changes the bottom of the foot makes in those particular actions. Good luck with your studies. Hope this helps, and I'll see you soon. Stay creative, everyone.